Nothing breeds insomnia quite like a wife on a late project for the fourth night running. That, or the gas station coffee I'd been mainlining since Tuesday. I stood in our cramped kitchen at 11:30 p.m., watching the fridge light flicker like a fading fluorescent bulb when Nola's second phone started buzzing on the granite countertop. The phone I wasn't supposed to know about. "You up?" E. Porter Kellor, 36 years old, supply chain consultant for mid-tier manufacturing companies, suddenly very awake. I'd been married to Nola for 8 years. She'd kept her maiden name for professional reasons. Corporate recruiting was all about personal branding, she'd explained. Now I wondered what else she'd kept separate for professional reasons. The front door creaked open. Nola's heels clicked against our hardwood floors with the precise rhythm of someone trying very hard to appear casual. I slipped her phone back where I'd found it and opened the fridge, pretending to hunt for leftover pizza. "Hey, babe." Her voice carried that artificial brightness people use when they're caught off guard. "You're up late." I turned around, taking in her appearance with the methodical attention to detail that made me good at my job. Her navy blazer was wrinkled, her lipstick had been reapplied, badly, and her pencil skirt was definitely on backward, the zipper catching light from the wrong angle. "Client dinner ran long?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "You know how it is with these pharmaceutical executives. They love their wine." She moved toward the stairs, avoiding eye contact. "I'm exhausted, going to shower and crash." "That why your skirt's on backward?" She froze mid-step. For exactly 3 seconds, her mask slipped, and I saw something I'd never seen before in 8 years of marriage. Genuine fear. Then she laughed. "God, you're right. I changed in the restaurant bathroom after spilling red wine all over myself. Guess I was more tired than I thought." The lie came so smoothly, so practiced, that I almost believed her. Almost. "Good thing pharmaceutical executives are understanding about wardrobe malfunctions," I said. She glared at me, really glared, with an intensity that made my stomach drop. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, Nola. Just making conversation with my wife." She stared at me for another moment, then turned and headed upstairs. I listened to her footsteps cross the bedroom floor, heard the bathroom door close, heard the shower start. Then I heard her second phone buzz again. This time, I didn't just read the message. I scrolled through weeks of them. "Can't stop thinking about this afternoon." "Your husband working late again?" "Conference room B is empty after 6. "Wear that red dress tomorrow." The timestamps told the real story. Messages sent during my business trips. Photos exchanged during her supposed client dinners. Video files with names like Office Fun Tuesday MP4. I clicked on one. The video was grainy, clearly shot on a phone, but the image quality was good enough. Nola, bent over a mahogany desk in what looked like a corner office. Behind her, a man I didn't recognize but could describe to a sketch artist. Brown hair, expensive shirt, wedding ring catching the light as his hands gripped her hips. I closed the video and set the phone down carefully, surprised by how steady my hands were. 8 years of marriage, and I'd just discovered my wife was starring in amateur pornography with someone named Ethan. The shower was still running upstairs. I opened my laptop and did what I do best. I started gathering data. Nola worked for Meridian Executive Recruiting, a boutique firm that specialized in pharmaceutical and biotech placements. Their website listed 12 employees. I cross-referenced the staff photos with my memory of the man in the video. Ethan Bloom, project manager, corporate partnerships, 31 years old according to his LinkedIn profile, MBA from Northeastern, divorced last year, recently purchased a condo in Back Bay, expensive neighborhood for someone his age. I dug deeper. Ethan had been tagged in several of Nola's Instagram posts over the past 6 months. Always group photos from company events, but I noticed the pattern now. They were always standing next to each other. His hand on her shoulder in 3 different pictures, her leaning into him at the company holiday party. The shower stopped running upstairs. I cleared my browser history, closed the laptop, and went back to the fridge. When Nola came down 10 minutes later in her bathrobe, I was eating cold pizza and scrolling through supply chain reports on my tablet. "You're really burning the midnight oil," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Big audit tomorrow. Johnson Manufacturing thinks they're losing inventory somewhere between their warehouse and their distributors. Probably an inside job. Sounds complicated. Usually is. People think they're smarter than the system, but numbers don't lie. Eventually, everything adds up." She kissed the top of my head, and I smelled her vanilla body wash mixed with something else. Men's cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "Don't stay up too late," she said. "Wouldn't dream of it." After she went upstairs, I sat in the dark kitchen for another hour, thinking. I'd built my career on finding discrepancies, tracking down missing assets, following paper trails that other people missed. I was good at it because I was patient, methodical, and I never let emotion cloud my judgment. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd start treating my marriage like any other audit. I just needed to figure out exactly what was missing and how much it was worth. I started with the basics: financial records, credit card statements, phone bills. The beauty of being married to someone for 8 years is that you have access to everything. The tragedy is that you never think to look until it's too late. Nola had been careful, but not careful enough. 3 charges at the Marriott downtown over the past 2 months, always on days when I was traveling for work. Lunch at expensive restaurants I'd never heard of, always for 2 people, always during business hours. A charge at Victoria's Secret for $237, lingerie I'd definitely never seen. But the real smoking gun was buried in our joint checking account, monthly transfers of $500 to an account I didn't recognize. The transfers had started 6 months ago, always on the 15th of the month, always with the memo consulting fee. I called the bank. "Mr. Kellor, yes, those transfers are going to an account under the name Ethan Bloom. The memo indicates payment for marketing consultation services." Marketing consultation, right. I thanked the representative and hung up, then sat in my home office staring at 8 years of financial records spread across my desk. Nola made $75,000 a year as a senior recruiter. I made $92,000 as a consultant. We lived comfortably but not extravagantly in our 3-bedroom Victorian in Newton, a suburb that was nice enough to impress Nola's colleagues, but affordable enough that we weren't house poor. Or so I'd thought. Now I was looking at evidence that my wife had been funneling $6,000 a year to her lover, disguising it as business expenses. Money that came from our joint account. Money that I'd earned auditing other people's books while she was screwing around with project manager Ethan. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone rang. Nola calling from work. "Hey babe, I'm going to be late again tonight. We're pitching a new client and the presentation needs to be perfect." "Which client?" A pause. "Biotech Solutions. They're looking to fill some senior positions." I pulled up Biotech Solutions on my laptop while she talked. According to their website, they were based in San Diego. Their careers page showed no current openings. "Sounds important," I said. "It could be huge for us. The team thinks we could land a 6-figure contract. Ethan thinks." She'd caught herself, but not quickly enough. "Well, good luck with the pitch. I'll probably be asleep when you get home. Don't wait up. This could go really late." After she hung up, I called Meridian Executive Recruiting and asked to speak with Nola Vero. "I'm sorry, Ms. Vero is out of the office today," the receptionist said. "She's at a client site. Can I take a message?" "No message. I'll try her cell." I hung up and checked Nola's location on Find My iPhone, a feature we'd activated years ago for practical reasons. According to her phone's GPS, she was at 285 Columbus Avenue in the South End. I looked up the address. It was Ethan Bloom's condo building. At 2:15 on a Wednesday afternoon, while she was supposedly in the office preparing for a presentation to a client that didn't exist, my wife was at her lover's apartment. I sat back in my chair and laughed. Actually laughed out loud, alone in my home office, because the situation was so absurdly cliched that it felt like a bad movie. Cheating wife, oblivious husband, afternoon rendezvous. I was living in a lifetime original drama. But I wasn't feeling like the oblivious husband anymore. I was feeling like an auditor who'd just found the missing inventory. The question now was what to do about it. I could confront Nola directly, but that would only lead to denials, gaslighting, and probably couples therapy, where I'd be told that her affair was somehow a symptom of problems in our marriage that I'd failed to address. I could hire a private investigator, but I already had enough evidence to prove infidelity. Massachusetts was a no-fault divorce state anyway. Proof of adultery wouldn't get me a better settlement. I could blow up their workplace romance by sending the video to their boss, but that felt petty and might backfire if Nola claimed I'd violated her privacy. Or I could do what I did best: follow the money, document everything, and build an airtight case that would leave them with no room to maneuver. I opened a new spreadsheet and started tracking patterns: dates, times, locations, financial transactions. Within 2 hours, I had a clear picture of their relationship timeline. The affair had started 6 months ago, right after Meridian's annual company retreat in Vermont. The hotel charges began 2 weeks later. The monthly payments to Ethan started a month after that. But there was something else, something that made my stomach turn. Nola had used our joint credit card to buy Ethan a birthday gift, a $1,500 watch from Tourneau, purchased 3 weeks ago. The same week she'd told me we needed to postpone our vacation to Maine because money was tight. She'd canceled our anniversary trip to buy her boyfriend a luxury watch, with my money. I closed the spreadsheet and walked to the kitchen, where I opened a beer and stood looking out at our backyard. We'd planted those tomatoes together last spring. We'd talked about putting in a deck this summer, maybe getting a dog next year. We'd made plans like people who expected to grow old together. But somewhere along the way, Nola had made different plans. My phone buzzed with a text from my old college roommate, Roddy Martinez, who now worked as a personal trainer at a gym in Cambridge. "Drinks tonight? Sarah's working late and I'm bored." I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, "Rain check. Dealing with some stuff at home. Everything okay?" I almost typed no, then deleted it and wrote, "Yeah, just work drama instead." But as I hit send, I realized that wasn't entirely true. This wasn't just work drama. This was my life imploding in slow motion, and I was watching it happen with the detached fascination of someone studying a particularly interesting case study. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I'd spent so many years analyzing other people's problems that I'd forgotten how to feel my own. Or maybe I was just in shock. Either way, I had work to do. The Meridian Executive Recruiting Annual Gala was held at the Omni Parker House, in a ballroom that probably cost more to rent than I made in 2 months. Nola had been talking about this event for weeks. It was their biggest client appreciation party of the year, and attendance was essentially mandatory for anyone who wanted to be taken seriously at the company. I hadn't planned to go. Spouse attendance was encouraged, but not required, and I'd used work as an excuse to skip these things in the past. But after discovering my wife's afternoon activities, I'd suddenly developed an interest in meeting her colleagues, especially her boss. "You look nice," Nola said, as we rode the elevator up to the ballroom. She was wearing a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, probably purchased with the same credit card she'd used to buy Ethan's watch. "Thanks. You look—" I paused, studying her face. She'd spent an hour on her makeup, and the result was flawless in a way that suggested she was trying to impress someone. "Professional." The ballroom was full of people I didn't recognize, all holding wine glasses and making the kind of small talk that passes for networking in corporate America. Nola immediately excused herself to work the room, leaving me standing near the bar with a bourbon and soda, watching her move through the crowd like a shark through a school of fish. She was good at this: the schmoozing, the strategic conversations, the careful balance of charm and ambition that made people want to do business with her. I'd always admired that about her, actually. I was better with numbers than people, more comfortable analyzing spreadsheets than analyzing social dynamics. But tonight, I was paying attention to the social dynamics. I watched Nola stop at a group of men in expensive suits, watched her laugh at something one of them said, watched her touch his arm in a gesture that lasted just a fraction of a second longer than professional courtesy required. Ethan Bloom. He was taller than he'd looked in the video, with the kind of confident posture that came from never having to worry about money or job security. His suit probably cost more than my car payment, and his smile had the practiced warmth of someone who'd learned to weaponize charm. I was studying him when someone sat down next to me at the bar. "You must be Porter Kellor." The voice was quiet, controlled, with the kind of authority that made people stop talking and pay attention. I turned to see a man in his early 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that made Ethan's look like something from Men's Warehouse. "I am. And you are?" "Liam Dorsey. I'm Nola's boss." He ordered a scotch, neat, and we sat in silence for a moment while the bartender poured. Around us, the party continued, laughter and conversation and the clink of glasses, but something about Liam's presence created a bubble of quiet intensity. "Your wife is very talented," he said finally. "She is. Ambitious, driven, the kind of employee who's always looking for ways to expand her responsibilities." There was something in his tone that made me look at him more carefully. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were watching the crowd with the focused attention of someone who missed nothing. "She's always been a hard worker," I said. "Yes, sometimes too hard. Sometimes she takes on projects that aren't officially part of her job description." I took a sip of bourbon and waited. In my experience, people who spoke in coded language usually had something specific they wanted to say. "The thing about ambitious people," Liam continued, "is that they sometimes make poor judgment calls. They think they're being clever, but they're actually being reckless." Across the room, I could see Nola and Ethan standing close together, their conversation animated and intimate in a way that would have looked inappropriate to anyone who was paying attention. "Your wife is crossing lines at work," Liam said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because I didn't know, I'd known for days, but because hearing it confirmed by her boss made it real in a way that credit card statements and GPS coordinates hadn't. Before I could respond, Nola appeared at my shoulder, her face flushed with wine and panic. "Porter, I didn't know you'd met Liam. Liam, this is my husband." She was trying to sound casual, but her voice had a brittle edge that suggested she'd seen us talking and rushed over to do damage control. Liam looked at her with the expression of someone who'd just confirmed a suspicion. "We were just discussing your work ethic." "Porter doesn't want to hear about boring office stuff," Nola said quickly. "Do you, honey?" "Actually, I find office dynamics fascinating," I said, "especially when they involve crossing lines." The temperature at our little corner of the bar seemed to drop 10 degrees. Nola's smile became strained, and Liam's expression grew colder. "Not for long," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on Nola. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around us, the party continued, but our conversation had created its own pocket of tension that felt separate from the rest of the room. "What do you mean?" Nola asked, but her voice was barely above a whisper. Liam stood up, straightened his tie, and looked at both of us with the expression of someone who just made a decision. "I think you know exactly what I mean." Then he walked away, leaving Nola and me standing at the bar in silence that felt heavier than the crowd noise around us. "What was that about?" I asked. "I have no idea. Liam's been under a lot of stress lately. The company's going through some reorganization, and I think he's just—" "Nola." She stopped talking and looked at me. "I know," I said simply. Her face went white. "Know what?" "Everything." For a moment she looked like she might deny it. I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I actually knew versus how much I was guessing. But something in my expression must have convinced her that denial wasn't an option. "Porter, I can explain." "No," I said, setting my drink down on the bar. "You can't." I walked away, leaving her standing there in her expensive dress, in the middle of her company's biggest party of the year, with her boss's threat hanging over her head and her marriage crumbling around her feet. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like the longest 60 seconds of my life. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the cool Boston evening and realized that I was free-falling through the wreckage of everything I'd thought I knew about my life. But for the first time in days, I wasn't angry. I was planning. I met Cassie Dorsey at a coffee shop in Harvard Square 3 days after the gala. She'd called me the morning after the party, introduced herself as Liam's wife, and suggested we have a conversation that would be mutually beneficial. Cassie was in her early 40s, with the kind of understated elegance that came from old money and good breeding. She ordered green tea and sat across from me with the posture of someone who'd learned to command attention without raising her voice. "I work in HR for a consulting firm downtown," she said without preamble. "Different company, but I know how these things work. Your wife and Ethan Bloom are about to become a very expensive problem for Meridian." "How expensive?" "Harassment lawsuits start at 6 figures. If there's evidence of financial impropriety, and Liam thinks there is, you're looking at potential criminal charges." I sipped my coffee and waited for her to continue. "The thing is," she said, "Liam doesn't want the scandal. He's worked too hard building Meridian's reputation to have it destroyed by 2 employees who couldn't keep their hands off each other." "What does he want?" "Clean resolution, minimal publicity, and your wife and her boyfriend gone without a lawsuit that drags the company's name through the mud." "And what do you want?" Cassie smiled, and for the first time since I'd discovered Nola's affair, I felt like I was talking to someone who understood the game I was playing. "I want to help you destroy them professionally while protecting my husband's business." Over the next hour, Cassie laid out what she knew. Nola and Ethan had been using company resources for personal travel. They'd submitted fraudulent expense reports for client dinners that were actually romantic getaways. Most damaging of all, they'd been sharing confidential client information with each other, information that Ethan had no business accessing as a project manager. "The paper trail is extensive," Cassie said. "Liam's been documenting everything for weeks. He was planning to fire them both, but then he realized that your wife's husband was a forensic auditor." "I'm not forensic. I do supply chain analysis." "Same skill set, different application. The point is, you know how to build a case that will stand up to legal scrutiny." She was right, and as she talked, I began to see the elegant solution that would give everyone what they wanted. Liam would get his employees gone without a scandal. I would get my revenge without looking vindictive, and Nola and Ethan would lose everything without being able to claim they were victims of a jealous husband's vendetta. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Access to your joint financial records. Proof that Nola's been using marital assets to fund her affair. Liam can handle the employment violations, but if we can show a pattern of financial deception that extends beyond the workplace, it becomes a much bigger problem for them." I thought about the monthly payments to Ethan, the hotel charges, the $1,500 watch. "I can get you that." "Good. But Porter?" She leaned forward, her expression serious. "Once we start this, there's no going back. Your marriage is over, obviously, but this will also destroy any chance Nola has of working in recruiting again. Her reputation will be finished." "She destroyed her own reputation," I said. "I'm just documenting it." Cassie nodded approvingly. "Liam said you'd understand the difference." We shook hands, and I walked back to my car feeling like I'd just enlisted the most powerful allies possible, a company that wanted to protect itself and a woman who understood how to destroy people professionally. That evening, I called my old college roommate Roddy and asked if he wanted to grab a beer. We met at a dive bar near his gym. The kind of place where the lighting was dim enough to hide the stains on the carpet, and the beer was cheap enough that you didn't ask questions about the expiration dates. "You look like hell," Roddy said after we'd ordered. He was built like the personal trainer he was, 6'2", 220, with the kind of physical presence that made people think twice about starting trouble. "I feel like hell." "Work?" "Wife." I told him everything. The affair, the money, the plan I was putting together with Liam and Cassie. Roddy listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking his head or muttering profanities under his breath. "Jesus, Porter! 8 years and she throws it away for some corporate pretty boy?" "Apparently." "What do you need from me?" The question surprised me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you didn't call me for relationship advice. You called me because you need something, and whatever it is, you know I'll help you get it." He was right. Roddy and I had been friends since freshman year at Boston University, and in all that time, he'd never let me down. When I'd needed help moving apartments, he'd shown up with a truck. When I'd been laid off from my first job out of college, he'd lent me money without being asked. When I'd been nervous about proposing to Nola, he'd spent an entire evening helping me plan the perfect proposal. Now, I needed something different. "I need muscle," I said. "Not for violence. I'm not looking to hurt anyone physically. But I need someone who can be intimidating when necessary. Someone who can make Ethan understand that his problems extend beyond the workplace." Roddy grinned. "You want me to scare the shit out of him. I want you to make him understand that actions have consequences." "Same thing, different words. I'm in." We clinked beer bottles, and I felt another piece of my plan click into place. Cassie would handle the professional destruction. I would handle the financial and legal aspects, and Roddy would handle the personal touch that would make sure Ethan understood exactly how badly he'd screwed up. "There's one more thing," I said. "When this is over, Nola's going to try to play the victim. She'll claim I was controlling, or that our marriage was already over, or that she was just trying to find happiness. I need people who know the truth." "What truth?" "That she's a liar and a cheat who destroyed a good marriage for a cheap thrill." Roddy nodded slowly. "You want character witnesses." "I want the truth to be louder than her lies." "Consider it done. I've got a big mouth and a lot of friends. By the time I'm finished talking, everyone in our circle will know exactly what kind of person Nola really is." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. For the first time since discovering the affair, I wasn't facing this alone. I had allies, resources, and a plan that would leave Nola and Ethan with no way to spin their destruction as anything other than the natural consequence of their own choices. "Thanks," I said. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when it's over and they're both living in cardboard boxes under the expressway." We finished our beers and made plans for the next phase of the operation. As I drove home to the house I'd soon be leaving forever, I realized that I was no longer the betrayed husband stumbling through the wreckage of his marriage. I was the auditor who'd found the discrepancies, and now it was time to balance the books. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning when Liam Dorsey called Nola and Ethan into his office for what he described as a routine compliance review. I wasn't there, obviously, but Cassie gave me a detailed report that evening. They walked in thinking it was about some minor paperwork issue, she said over the phone. Liam had everything spread out on his conference table: expense reports, hotel receipts, email printouts, travel authorizations. 2 months' worth of documentation. I was sitting in my home office, looking at my own collection of evidence: bank statements, credit card bills, GPS location data, and a folder full of photographs I'd taken during my own surveillance operations over the past week. How did they react? Nola tried to bluff her way through it, started talking about how all their expenses were legitimate business costs, how they'd been working closely on several major accounts. Ethan just sat there looking like he was going to throw up. And then Liam dropped the hammer. told them he knew about the fraudulent expense reports, the misappropriation of client information, and the use of company resources for personal activities. Then he showed them the security footage. I sat up straighter. What security footage? Conference room cameras. Apparently, your wife and her boyfriend thought they were being discreet, but Meridian's security system captures everything. Liam had 3 different videos of them in compromising positions in company conference rooms. The irony was almost too perfect. Nola had been so careful about hiding her affair from me that she'd forgotten about the cameras that recorded her every move at work. What happened next? Ethan broke first, started crying, actually crying, and begging Liam not to fire him. Said he had student loans and a mortgage and couldn't afford to lose his job. Nola got angry, started yelling about harassment and hostile work environment, threatening to sue the company. That's when Liam played his ace? Exactly. He told her that if she wanted to make this a legal matter, he'd be happy to turn over all the evidence to the district attorney's office for review. Fraud, embezzlement, theft of company resources. He had enough to make their lives very complicated. The beauty of Liam's approach was that it gave Nola and Ethan a choice: accept termination and walk away quietly, or face criminal charges that would destroy any chance they had of working in corporate America again. They took the termination? They took the termination. Effective immediately, no severance, no references, and they had to sign non-disclosure agreements that prevent them from discussing the circumstances of their departure. What about the money? That's where your documentation comes in. Liam gave them until Friday to reimburse the company for all fraudulent expenses, or he files criminal charges regardless of the NDAs. I looked at the spreadsheet I'd prepared, showing exactly how much money Nola had stolen from our joint accounts to fund her affair. Between the monthly payments to Ethan, the hotel charges, the expensive gifts, and the fraudulent business expenses, the total was just over $18,000. Money they didn't have. Money that would have to come from somewhere. There's one more thing, Cassie said. Liam made it clear that if either of them tries to work for any company in Meridian's network, which includes most of the major recruiting and consulting firms in New England, he'll make sure their new employers know exactly why they were terminated. Professional blacklisting. Complete professional destruction. They'll be lucky to get jobs selling insurance in strip malls. After I hung up with Cassie, I sat in my office for a long time, thinking about the conversation I was about to have with Nola. She'd been at work when Liam lowered the boom, but she'd be home soon, and I needed to be ready for whatever story she tried to tell. I didn't have to wait long. She came through the front door at 6:30, moving with the shell-shocked slowness of someone who'd just watched their life explode. Her face was blotchy from crying, and her hands were shaking as she set down her purse. "Porter?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Are you home?" "In the office." She appeared in my doorway, looking like a stranger. The confident, ambitious woman I'd married had been replaced by someone who looked lost and frightened and very young. "I lost my job today," she said. "I know." "You know? How do you—" She stopped, and I watched understanding dawn on her face. "You did this. You're the one who gave Liam the information." "I didn't give Liam anything. He already had everything he needed. I just provided some additional context." "Additional context?" Her voice was rising. "You destroyed my career. You ruined my life." "No, Nola. You did that yourself. I just documented it." She stared at me for a moment, then collapsed into the chair across from my desk. "What do you want?" "I want a divorce. I want you out of this house. And I want you to understand that every choice you made over the past 6 months led directly to this moment. Porter, please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can't do anything. There is no we anymore. You made sure of that when you decided to fund your boyfriend's lifestyle with my money." I slid a folder across the desk to her. "Divorce papers. I'm filing for dissolution of marriage based on irreconcilable differences. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. She opened the folder with trembling hands, scanning the legal documents that would end our 8-year marriage. You can't just throw me out. I have rights. You have the rights that Massachusetts law gives you, which is exactly half of our marital assets, minus any money you stole for personal use. My lawyer estimates that comes to about $37,000. $37,000? Porter, this house is worth $400,000. My half should be... Your half would be $200,000 if you hadn't embezzled $18,000 from our joint accounts to pay for hotels, gifts, and monthly stipends for your lover. Theft of marital assets is grounds for adjustment of property division. You can't prove... I can prove everything. Bank records, credit card statements, GPS data, hotel receipts. I've been building this case for 2 weeks, Nola. I know about every transaction, every lie, every afternoon you spent at Ethan's apartment while you were supposed to be at work. She was crying now, but they weren't the tears of someone who was sorry for what she'd done. They were the tears of someone who was sorry she'd been caught. What about Ethan? She asked. What about him? Did he lose his job too? Even now, even after losing everything, she was worried about her boyfriend. The realization hit me like a physical blow, not because it hurt, but because it made me understand how completely she'd checked out of our marriage. Yes, he lost his job, and unless he can come up with $9,000 by Friday to reimburse Meridian for his share of the fraudulent expenses, he's going to lose a lot more than that. $9,000. Porter, he doesn't have that kind of money. Then he should have thought about that before he decided to steal from his employer. She looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, pure hatred mixed with desperation. You're destroying innocent people. Innocent? I laughed, and the sound surprised both of us. Nola, you and Ethan committed fraud, embezzlement, and theft. The only innocent person in this situation is me, and I'm the one whose life you destroyed. I never meant for any of this to happen. You meant for all of it to happen. You just didn't mean to get caught. She stood up, clutching the divorce papers to her chest like a shield. I'll fight this. I'll hire a lawyer and fight for what's mine. Go ahead, but remember that everything I've told you tonight will become public record in a divorce proceeding. Every detail of your affair, every dollar you stole, every lie you told. Is that really how you want this to play out? She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out of my office. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, heard her moving around in our bedroom, heard her making phone calls in a voice too low for me to understand the words. An hour later, she came back downstairs with 2 suitcases and her laptop bag. I'm staying with Maya tonight, she said. Maya was one of her work friends, former work friends, I supposed. Good luck with that. She paused at the front door. This isn't over, Porter. Yes, it is. After she left, I walked through our house, my house now, and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. For the first time in weeks, I was alone with the truth instead of alone with lies. I poured myself a bourbon, sat down at my desk, and called Roddy. Phase 1 complete, I said when he answered. How do you feel? I thought about the question for a moment. Like I just finished the most important audit of my career. And